Good morning. My name is John Lohman. I am the publisher of the Corridor Business Journal. On behalf of my wife, Aspen, who's the co-owner of the business, and our entire staff, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2020 Corridor Manufacturing Conference. The Manufacturing Conference looks a little different this year. As many of you know, this event was originally scheduled to be held in person. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are doing things a little bit differently today. We are recording live from the hotel at Kirkwood Center in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Instead of addressing 250 manufacturing leaders, there are a handful of people in this ballroom, all of which are necessary to the production of this event. We are, however, excited to be able to share this event with a much larger audience online and bring some larger national speakers virtually. I hope all of you had a chance to familiarize yourself with the Whova Event app. We will be streaming all of the speaker presentations today on Whova as individual webinars. This will allow you to log in and into the individual sessions throughout the day as your schedule permits. In addition to accessing speaker presentations, you can use the app to engage with the speakers and other attendees in the Attendees and Community tabs. Use the Sponsors and Exhibitors tab to check out exhibitors' videos, contact information, handouts, and giveaways. This is also where you can participate in the Passport Prize Raffle contest. The CBJ will be giving away $250 gift cards to 2 lucky Passport contest winners. You must do 3 simple things to collect virtual stamps for your passport. Number 1, you need to like an exhibitor's booth. Number 2, you need to comment on their booth in the chat section. And number 3, you need to claim exhibitors' deals and offers. Doing these 3 simple things at one booth will give you 1 stamp in your passport. Participants who collect 10 stamps will automatically be entered into the raffle. I'd now like to take a minute to thank our sponsors. Without their support and input, we would not be able to host this event. The event is presented by Kirkwood Community College with support from Van Meter, Shive Hattery, the City of Cedar Rapids, Strategic Financial Solutions, the Iowa Association of Business and Industry, the Iowa Economic Development Authority, Bergen KDV, and the Baker Group. Shive Hattery has a full-service, multidisciplinary industrial team made up of in-house architecture, design, and engineering experts to support every aspect of your project, from initial design plans and regulatory permitting to mechanical, electrical, and plumbing services. The Iowa Economic Development Authority strengthens economic and community vitality by building partnerships and leveraging resources to make Iowa the choice for people and business. IEDA administers several state and federal programs to accomplish its goal of assisting individuals, communities, and businesses. And the Baker Group is one of the nation's top specialty contractors. As an employee-owned organization, Baker Group employees are committed to delivering reliable, client-focused, and high-value construction services to each customer they serve. The company's team of 700 employees serves all types and sizes of commercial and industrial clients. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the rest of our sponsors later in the program. In the meantime, you can find more information about all of our sponsors under the Sponsors tab. I did also want to give a shout out to the Manufacturing Planning Committee. We've worked closely with several local manufacturers and industry leaders to determine the topics and speakers you will be seeing here in a moment. I want to thank all of those folks for helping us out. So after a year of planning, we are proud to present the 2020 Manufacturing Conference. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to say just a few more words, and then Kirkwood President, Dr. Lori Sundberg, will give a brief welcome before introducing our morning keynote speaker, Ernie Goss. After Ernie's presentation, we will take a 15-minute break. This will give everyone time to network, check out exhibitor booths, and use the restroom. And then the session after that will start promptly at 9:10. So let's get started. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Lori Sundberg of Kirkwood Community College here to kick off today's program. Is your business prepared for the new normal? Kirkwood Corporate Training can help your company prepare for and adapt to many of the critical business functions that rule in the new normal in today's world. Contact Kirkwood today to get started at Kirkwood, www.kirkwood.edu/corporate training. Dr. Lori Sundberg took the reins at Kirkwood Community College in 2018 after spending 8 years as president of the Carl Sandburg College in Galesburg, Illinois. She is Kirkwood Community College's 5th president and first female president. Originally involved in institutional research, her professional background also includes experience in marketing, grant writing, human resources, negotiations, and academic affairs. We're fortunate to have Dr. Lori Sundberg with us here today. So I'll now turn the program over to Dr. Lori Sundberg. Thank you.
Good morning, and thanks, John and the CBJ, for asking me to be here today. Kirkwood enjoys a great partnership with the CBJ in terms of advancing the workforce needs of this region. So I just want to take a moment and I want to recognize John Lohman and the CBJ for all that they do for the corridor. These events are wonderful, and with COVID now, they involve so much more work for the CBJ. So your commitment, John, is appreciated. Well, things have certainly changed for us all in the last 6 months. Life as we knew it back in February is now just a distant memory for us. So you're probably wondering how Kirkwood is doing with the pandemic, and I can say with certainty that we're hanging in there and we are continuing to do all that we can for this to serve this region. Our students have been terrific when it comes to masking and social distancing. We have good supplies of PPE and a tremendous faculty and staff who've been very flexible to meet student needs. Kirkwood plays a big role in workforce training and in providing a pipeline of workers. And we do this through internships, marketing, and the training investment made by companies in our region. We have strong advisory boards for our manufacturing programs to ensure our programs are out in front of the technology advancements. Our industrial department has invested wisely in technology, and our labs remain some of the most advanced that you'll find anywhere. We had the president of the National Manufacturing Organization here for a tour last year, and he was blown away with our labs, which I appreciated because it really was that outside validation that we're doing what we need to do to be current. We also have manufacturing programs in our regional centers to ensure we have these programs available to high school students. Corporate training at Kirkwood partners with manufacturing employers to provide necessary incumbent worker training as well, and also advises employers on various local and state job training funds that are available to supplement their training budgets. Lastly, we want to engage with all of you. We need all of you to work with us and communicate your needs so we're certain that we're doing everything that we can to meet your needs. Dr. Kim Betchika and her team are terrific, and they're very willing to listen to employers and to respond to all of their needs. So now on to today's program. Dr. Ernie Goss is the director of the Institute for Economic Inquiry and a professor of economics at Creighton University, Hyder College of Business, where he holds the Jack A. MacAllister Chair in Regional Economics. He is also director of the Goss Institute for Economic Research in Denver, Colorado, a bipartisan think tank conducting business and economic research and providing innovative, practical recommendations that affect change in public policy. As an economist, Dr. Goss is a highly respected, nationally known expert on the mid-American economy who can articulate how regional economic situations can impact the nation and the world, and vice versa. Dr. Ernie Goss is joining us remotely today from Nebraska. Ernie, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Dr. Sundberg, and thanks to all of you for joining in, of course, and let me bring up, hopefully, this, may take me a moment, but thanks to Kirkwood Community College, thanks, of course, to John Lohman and Carter Business Journal, and hopefully everyone can see the screen. If you can't see that, if someone can let me know. But first off, I go by Ernie. I only ask my wife and kids to call me Dr. Goss, but you know how that goes. And as Dr. Sundberg said, are we living in interesting times? Who could ask? Every day is a new day, and every day is something else. And my title used to be Black Swans and the Economic Growth Model. Well, Black Swans, of course, is an economic event that's low probability but high cost. Well, who could have envisioned COVID-19 and I really appreciate being back here with all of you. And thanks to the Corridor Business Journal for all they do and for the area. And you're talking about your area, the Cedar Rapids regional area. I would argue is one of the top areas in this part of the country in terms of education on both sides of the interstate. Of course, you're talking about Kirkwood Community College, you're talking about University of Iowa, you're talking about some of the top manufacturers in the region and in the nation in some cases. And so this is a vital economic area. And for those who haven't had the chance to look this morning, we just had the release of the jobs report this morning, about 30 minutes ago. And it was reported jobs additions down 660,000. The unemployment rate was down 7.9%. Give me a break. That's what we're talking about in terms of pointing out the negatives. It was not negative. When you add 660,000 jobs, it is down from last month. Of course, when you keep pulling from this labor pool, we're getting more and more having more and more difficulty finding and hiring qualified workers. And I'll talk about that later. That's one of the big issues, particularly facing manufacturers. So that said, let's talk about, and gosh, what could be more relevant right now with the president reporting that the president has coronavirus, and we all, of course, pray for his swift return. But look at the COVID-19 hospitalizations as a percent of total hospital capacity. Infections are important, but this is more important and an indicator of, is it something we need to be concerned about? And you're talking about Iowa has the hospitalizations, 3% of your hospital capacity, meaning you have lots of hospital capacity, particularly in Cedar Rapids, of course. But of course, in Cedar Rapids, you're also talking about some with the University of Iowa and Kirkwood Community College students. And college students, I can tell you, I've been part of the colleges for a long, long time. Students don't do what we always want them to do, and that's not such a bad thing. And but anyway, their infection rates are higher there, but the outcome is much more positive for students. So again, the death rates are going down, the hospitalization rates are going down, and Iowa's doing well here. And let me just say, we have some folks that are talking about, well, if we have to, we'll close the economy down again. Get real. I try not to get into the medical area if the medical folks will quit getting into my area, which is economics. We have several states that are essentially closed down, and it's not working. When you close down, when you open back up, you see infection rates going back up, hospitalizations going back up, and you also see, of course, death rates going up. Sweden has shown us how to do it. They never did it close down like other nations, and their death rate is moving. It's not moving down. Well, the death rate is moving down, but the total number of deaths, of course, is going up from the COVID-19. But they're coming out of this much stronger than other nations such as Spain, Italy, France, and even Germany, and Great Britain, of course, and the U.S. So no reason to close down if you're, and hopefully, and the governors in this part of the country have been much more sane. And you see Iowa there is ranked 24th best in the nation in terms of hospitalizations, COVID-19 hospitalizations, as a percent of beds available. And I'm listing Nebraska there. And why am I listing Nebraska? Well, because Nebraska, in terms of your neighbors, is the most like Iowa. Now the population density is less, but you're talking about two states that are very similar in many, many, many respects. So I'll compare Nebraska and Iowa throughout my presentation here. And before I go further, I think one thing I need to say, and we all need to recognize, is that a lot of what I present, what came out this morning, the jobs report, all that, these are coming from a sample. Now, what does that mean? There's a probability associated with it. And we don't know the real number. We're saying here's the midpoint, and there's a probability distribution associated with that. And particularly with the jobs report and the unemployment rate. And if you've been watching, you see the unemployment rate from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's 7.9. Then you see the unemployment rate coming out of your own Department of Labor, which is the insured unemployment rate. That's coming from a population. It's not a sample. It doesn't have a probability distribution. It doesn't have an error rate. So, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Let me tell you a little story. I was in the military, and I was I was going through aircrew training school, aircrew training in Norfolk, Virginia, many years ago, of course. But anyway, I was going I was training in Norfolk, and I grew up in Georgia. My parents took me down to the train station. I was taking a train, and took a train to Norfolk, I was hoping. Got to Portsmouth, and short, of course, and it was short of Norfolk. And it was Norfolk and Portsmouth is separated by a tunnel. So here I am in a fast food place in Portsmouth, trying to figure out how I'm going to get across to Norfolk. And of course, I didn't know. I was walking around. This gentleman said, "Hey, I'll take you." And so I didn't know the person, so I get in the car, in his car with him. We're going through the tunnel on our way to Norfolk. And I'm a wise guy, and I said, "Hey, how do you know I'm not a serial killer?" He turns to me, he says, "You know what the probabilities are of 2 serial killers in this car, in this place, at this time?" And then I'm thinking, okay, you're right. Okay, gotcha. In other words, everything has a probability. Most things have a probability distribution. So I'll try to point those out today. And by the way, I understand telling a joke is very risky in this, when you're online like this. It's like playing basketball without, I know you're there, you're an audience, but you don't get to hear anybody laugh. So I should have had some canned laughter right there. That would have made me feel a little better about that joke. But anyway, moving forward. Let's talk about the insured unemployment rate. Now again, this one is a population, so there is no probability distribution for this. Look at that. This is the U.S. number. It reached a peak of 15.6%, and this, of course, is back in May. And here is the Nebraska number, reached a peak of 7.9. It's now down to 3.1%, the latest numbers out there. And then you see the Iowa one, which is somewhere in between, but nonetheless much lower. And we normally see that. Iowa usually has a much lower unemployment rate than the U.S. And so we're looking good, but I have to say, to put it in a term, negatives are getting less negative, or the positives are getting more positive. Whichever you choose to voice that, those are how you could characterize it right now. We're not out, but we're getting out. We're crawling out of this deep recession. And I'd like to say, thank goodness for Congress and for the President and for the Federal Reserve. Who could have thought they could act so quickly and do what they've done so effectively, in my judgment, to come out of this recession, or at least we're coming out. We're not out yet, but thank goodness for the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and other support, particularly the farm support that's come through, which is very important for Iowa in this part of the country. Now let me turn to my next slide, of course. Now look at the job, this is between January and April. Look at there, look at that. Iowa lost 12% of its non-farm jobs. Nebraska, almost 9%. The U.S., 14.4%. So that is those are some heavy losses. And if you look at what's happened since April to August, the latest number, now, I would be able to get those U.S. numbers and Iowa numbers. They can't. Well, the state numbers did not come out this morning. They'll come out later on this morning. But look at that, 7% gain for Iowa, very strong. Nebraska, 4.8, not as strong. And then you see there at the U.S. numbers even stronger than both Iowa and Nebraska, but they had more to gain, more fuel there to put on the fire. And the fire is, of course, the job, the economy. Now here's the yellow, tells you where we are right now. Iowa's still down about 6% from pre-COVID-19 levels, from pre-COVID-19 levels. And there you see Nebraska down by somewhat less, and the U.S. down by even more, 7.4. So the point here is that Iowa is doing better than the U.S., not as well as Nebraska. Two of your neighbors, Nebraska and South Dakota, have done somewhat better. Your other neighbors, not as well as you have in Iowa. So Iowa's done quite well. Like to see us doing better, but we're getting out of this. We're moving ahead. Thank goodness for that. Now let me show you about, this is for Cedar Rapids and comparing Iowa. Now look at this. There's the Iowa number, and this is non-farm. We're up to 6.2% annualized. That's very strong right now. This is a 3-month moving average, which is annualized. Now that's a lot rolled into one number, but normally that's probably, you would hope to be 2 to 3% there, even less, 1.5 to 2 to 3 would be a good number. 6.2 is excellent. Look at Cedar Rapids, not quite as strong, but still good, in a good range right there, Cedar Rapids. Now I want to turn now to something that's more of a fundamental part of the economy, not that everything else is not important and not fundamental, but manufacturing growth. Here's the Iowa manufacturing, and here you see Cedar Rapids manufacturing. Look at that growth, 33.7% manufacturing growth. Now again, that's 3-month moving average annualized. That is a whopping growth rate, and we're seeing in our survey that I'll present later on. But nonetheless, you have to give yourself a pat on the back. I certainly didn't have anything to do with it. I'm just the reporter here, but manufacturing is doing quite well. And here's I won't call it a dirty little secret. Manufacturers are telling us 40%, oh, I'm sorry, 4 out of 5 are telling us they're having difficulty finding and hiring workers, finding and hiring qualified workers, I should say. So this is an issue. And of course, Kirkwood Community College and University of Iowa are doing a great job at providing some of those workers, many of those workers, but we need even more. And that's going to be the big factor governing what goes on for the overall economy. Now let me show you this. And here's the real problem. If manufacturing is doing so darn well, what about other industries? Let's look at leisure and hospitality. Look at that. I mean, I do, of course, surveys, and I visit companies. I visited a large hotel here in Omaha, a conference hotel, and I asked about their food services division. They went from 250 jobs to 4. 4. That's what we're talking about. Hotels and restaurants are having one heck of a tough time. And if you think it's tough here, go to New York. If you think it's tough here, go to Boston. I was just in Boston. I was practically the only person in the hotel. It seemed as though there were very few of us in that hotel. Hotels here are doing somewhat better, but down 10%, around 10% for both Iowa and Nebraska. And there you see government also still down. Let's look at information. That's technology, high-tech, information technology, down. Look at education and health. Now Nebraska's got a little positive number there, but health, and here you think about it, we've overreacted. Many of us, and probably includes some of you out there, are not going and having your regular checkups because you just don't want to get out of the house, or you don't want to go into an environment where you might get COVID-19 or the coronavirus. So optional, or when you get to choose your procedures, many of us are choosing not to have those medical procedures. And it's we can have telemedicine, but hard to get that, in men's case, hard to get that prostate exam via telemedicine. And I will not live to see that day, I'm certain. But nonetheless, and many of us are delaying those, not getting those. So I'm really concerned about what we're doing in closing down schools in some cases. and individuals not getting their medical checkups. Look at transportation. I mean, United Airlines, Delta Airlines, American Airlines announcing huge cuts. But why? Of course, you don't need an economist to tell you this. Individuals are not they're not flying to Miami or flying to Chicago or flying to New York or Boston or San Francisco or to Des Moines or to Cedar Rapids to conferences. You're staying home. They're having a heck of a time of it. And the new stimulus package, which is now before Congress, and I doubt it, seems like the only thing Congress can pass is gas, and it's tough. I'm not encouraging a new stimulus package, at least a robust one, a big one. I think we do need a slim down, or what's called a skinny stimulus package. We may not even get that, but there's some incentives or some support there for airlines. Look at wholesale. Now, this is very important for Cedar Rapids. Wholesale, manufacturing, of course, warehousing. Warehousing is included in here. Down 2.6%. Now, these are Iowa numbers, not Cedar Rapids numbers. In Nebraska, you see, this is very important industry, both wholesale and transportation. Now, look at retail trade, both down. Although retail trade for the U.S. is up. Now, what's that mean? We're all buying from we're buying from Amazon and other onliners, and my daughter comes in and tells me, hey, I got I got this in 1 day delivery. And I tell her, well, guess what? I just went to the store and got this in 2 hours. How about that? In other words, perhaps we have a responsibility right now, in my judgment. This is non-economic talk here. I think we need to support our local retailers. Go there, provide some support for them, the restaurants. I know we're reticent to do that. We need to support locally right now. We're killing off some of our retailers and the communities out there. Many of you live in those communities. Professional and business services, they're both down. Manufacturing down there, but we're, in terms of Cedar Rapids, in terms of other areas, you're back now to above your pre-COVID levels in Cedar Rapids. You now have more manufacturing employment today than you had prior to the onset of the coronavirus. Now here, construction. Sorry about that. Construction there, and you see, is there a question out there? Right. Okay, construction. We've seen that being very strong, of course. And even with that, residential, there's still a shortage of homes there. And we need to see even better growth there. Now let me go to my next slide. And this is our leading economic indicator. This just came out yesterday. And we released yesterday, the US released yesterday, and we released the rural Main Street about the third week in September. So all these are fairly contemporaneous. Let me show you about Iowa there. I'm sorry, US, my mistake. 55.4, 50 is growth neutral, so you see some pretty good numbers there, and that's a good number. And you see here the dip right here. Back in April, we hit a fair, and I'll show you, let me show you the Mid-America. Look at that, even bigger dip back in the recession, when the recession began, the coronavirus began. Now this is the April number. That's the lowest since the recession of 2008 and 2009. But let me show you this, rural Main Street. Wow, that's just some tough sledding right now for rural areas. But the federal government has provided farm support for farmers out there. 1/3 of net farm income is coming from the federal government this year. So the real losers right now are those that serve the farmer, and the farmers are just not buying farm implements, for example. We need, I don't know how I can encourage, farmers know better what's best for them. I can't tell them, but I wish they'd go in and buy a new harvester or some new equipment. And I've said as much as I need to say about farm equipment. I was at NASA before I came to Creighton, and NASA's got nothing on the farm sector in terms of high technology and equipment. But that said, 46.9 you see, still below growth neutral, and that we're going to continue to see some struggles there in terms of farmland prices and so on. Now let me turn to this. Now there's one of my, I think this, he's played in Talladega Nights. Negative interest rates. Are you kidding me? The Federal Reserve has done about all they can do. We've got very low interest rates, and so those of you out there saying, should I wait on lower interest rates? The answer is no. They're not going to get, they could get somewhat lower on the long end, long-term interest rates, short-term interest rates. The Fed, and this is unbelievable, the Feds have many on the open market committee that set interest rates on the short end. The short end, that's important. They set short-term interest rates, not long-term interest rates. They've indicated they may keep rates low until 2023. Now that, I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to raise rates before then, but long-term interest rates, they will not go to negative interest rates. Japan has showed us how not to do it. It doesn't work. Europe's shown us how not to do it. Negative interest rates do not work. And so let me show you about some of that. Let's look at gold prices. And I get this question a lot. Should I be in gold? Part of your portfolio should be in gold. Now, not all of it, not even a significant part, but I think part of your portfolio should be in gold. Part of mine is in gold. Let's look at gold prices. Look at that. Of course, I expected gold. Here's the price over here. I expected it almost broke 2,000. It's not. It pulled back. Now this week it went below $1,900 an ounce. What's happening here, and why I would put part of my portfolio in gold is inflation. I think is going to tick up. You can't throw money at the problem like the federal government has done and have not stimulate inflation above a certain level. Gold reflects that. Gold also reflects increasing risk. So when risks are up, and inflation's up, you're going to see gold take off. Now, I expect risk to come down somewhat, but inflation to go up. So gold is probably going to be in this range for a while, and probably going to be turning upward in 2000, certainly I think in the second half of 2021. Now let's look at interest rates. There you see the 10-year Treasury. That's the best measure. You don't need an economy. The 10-year Treasury yield, and I'll show it to you shortly, the current one as this moment. You look at that. So you see, it doesn't take an economist to tell you they may move in opposite directions. When the 10-year yield comes down, the gold prices go up. Why? Because you put money in gold, you get it out of bonds. No surprise there. Where is the 10-year yield right now? 0.6% to 0.7%. That's very supportive of the price of gold. And as I said, inflation's still low, so it hasn't been as supportive of gold lately, but I expect it to be later on when the new what's called sometimes called modern monetary theory. That's AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, congressperson from New York. She says, hey, print more money, print more money. And there are lots of, it's called modern monetary theory. It's something coming out of politicians, not economists. If somebody says we need to go in modern monetary theory, reach for your back, put your hand on your wallet, because they're trying to take some of your money. Meaning the federal government can spend, enlarge deficit. The deficit's running $4 to $5 trillion this year. The overall debt is going to, now that includes public and private, is going to move 130 to 150% of GDP. Now, it used to be that I figured I was going to have to pay for the deficit and the debt. No. Then it was my kids were going to have to pay for it. No. Then it was my grandkids going to have to pay for it. Nope. Probably my great-grandkids. They're going to have to pay for it. But here are the mortgage rates that have come down, down, down. Could mortgage rates move lower? Yes. But if you need to borrow right now, now's a great time to borrow. And borrowing, I recommend it. And I'm not going to try to get a lower rate. I'll go for this one, 30-year. And of course, 15 years, much the same. Now, I'm going to spend a lot of time on the conclusions here. And so let me turn to my first conclusion. Indicators to watch. The yield on the 10-year Treasury. Most important thing you can watch. What that reflects is, like the price of gold, reflects risk. When risks are up, the yields come down. They're at record lows, almost record lows right now. Inflation up, that yield goes up. So it's like gold, it's a measure. The problem is you can lose a lot more money, I think, in buying the 10-year bond than you can, a bond fund, I should say, than you can in gold, in my view. First-time claims for unemployment insurance yesterday came out, 800 and some odd thousand first-time claims. That's coming down, down, down. Good indicator, good, and that comes out every Thursday. Here, the employment report came out this morning, and it was a good one. And it bewilders me to see the headlines negative. There's no way you can take that employment report and be negative. It's strong. The job additions are going to come down simply because of fewer and fewer workers out there to draw upon. Gold prices, again, reflecting like the 10-year Treasury, reflects inflation. Inflation's up, gold prices up. Risk up, gold prices up. Now, when risk, I expect, again, risk to come down, but that'll have a lot to do with what we call black swans. And of course, we had a black swan last night. The president announced the president had coronavirus. Now, that increases uncertainty and increases risk. And even those enemies of President Trump have to be concerned, not just for him personally or his family, but also what does it do internationally? What does it do in terms of the overall economy, in my case? The outlook, Federal Reserve will do what is essential to underpin debt and equity markets. What does this mean for you? It means corporate bonds and most of the bond markets are going to remain pretty good investments, or I shouldn't say pretty good investments, low interest rates, low yields. But I don't expect defaults, except I do expect defaults in the municipal bond market. Many local governments out there have overspent, and some of them are going to have to pay the price with defaults. So I'd be watch out there if your company is buying those or holds those. Short-term interest rates will remain in record low territory until 2021. When in 2021? The second half, not the first half. I do expect, now if I were on the open market committee setting interest rates, I would be voicing concern and listen to the head of the Federal Reserve of St. Louis. He's been sort of saying this, and I'm sure he would not appreciate me saying that he and I are in accord many times, because I'm not often in accord with what the Federal Reserve does, but they're doing a good job. They've done a great job, and so has the federal government. Congress and the president have reacted quickly. U.S. federal debt will expand to 130 to 150% of GDP. We're getting into Japanese territory. We're getting into Chinese territory, overspending. And what will that mean for you? There will either mean higher taxes, higher interest rates, or higher inflation, or maybe all three. Someone has to pay the price. Yeah, and when will you know it? Keep an eye on that 10-year Treasury. When that yield begins to rise, you know something's going on there. Now, it's going to have to rise. How much would interest rates increase if they went back to normal? Get this, about 3%. 3% higher. In other words, mortgage rates, if they went back to normal, could be up by 3%. And other interest rates as well. So that's something to watch out for. So the debt, and the federal government just cannot spend, nor can your state and local government spend without putting some restraints on. And the restraints are going to be higher taxes, higher inflation, or higher interest rates, or a combination of all three. President Biden, if he does become president, has promised us higher taxes. As George Bush, George H.W. Bush, back in 2000, when he ran for office in 1992, said, well, actually, he said it in 1988, sorry. Read my lips, no new taxes. Well, Vice President Biden said, read my lips, more new taxes. Now, if a politician is telling you they're going to be raising rates or taxes, they will be raising taxes. The corporate tax rate, here's a good one, taking the cap off taxable Social Security, taking the cap off taxable Social Security wages and income. That's a huge increase for some small businesses, as much as 15%, on the next dollar, that is. They've also promised increases in the income tax rate. Watch out for those of you, I know you're already preparing for it, Social Security, the unemployment tax. Now that's a state tax, of course. That's going to go up. The funds are dangerously low out there. We're going to have to renew those. So if you've got bad experience rating, meaning if you had high levels of unemployment, your taxes are going to go up. It's going to be a Nike swoosh rebound. What do I mean by that? And it's not going to be until the first half of 2021. You've got just there's too much going on in leisure and hospitality. So even though manufacturing is doing well, some in retail are doing well, hospitals, healthcare not as well. You put it all together, it's not a V-shaped recovery. Now some manufacturing, it has been a V-shaped recovery. Warehousing, it has been a V-shaped recovery. Now here's something that you would be much more familiar with than I, but our supply managers tell us bottlenecks out there. That is bottlenecks in terms of deliveries. Delivery speeds are slowing down. We're seeing transportation bottlenecks, trucking, rail, air. And that's something that's a concern of mine, a big concern. And you know it better than I do. You're ordering something for your company and it's taking longer to get it there. Supply bottlenecks. I can give you my own experience. I had gutters put on my house. It took a month to 2 months longer than it should have just to get those gutters in. Now that's happening throughout the region in terms of particularly manufacturing. Inflation turns upward in the second half of 2021. It's very low right now, but I expect it to. Just too much money out there, too many dollars chasing too few goods. Now it hasn't happened yet. Why has it not happened yet? It's because individuals are saving. Our savings rate went from about 3% to 25%. No surprise there. Where are you going to spend your money? You going out to dinner? You know, you go to a restaurant, well, you sit in one corner of the restaurant and somebody else sits in the other corner. That's not a fun environment. So we've been cutting back on our spending and saving, over-saving. Risk premiums will remain high, meaning some of those bond yields, corporate bond yields, will remain somewhat higher than what you'd expect, even though they're still too low for my comfort. I'm not buying bonds right now, not in the bond market. Tough sledding for ethanol. Sorry about this, folks. I was the #1 ethanol producer in America. Oil prices are remaining low. 40% of the bankers in our survey report that plants have been temporarily closed, in some cases permanently closed. Here's a good one. I'm doing a study on sports betting right now. Sports betting in Iowa casinos began in August of 2018. Rather than cannibalizing betting on slots and table games, it's actually increased. It's been supportive of the overall casino revenue. So that's been good for the casinos. Of course, not recently though. That's been the first 7 months. There were 7 months where there was sports betting in Iowa. Less support for for agriculture going forward. Right now, 1/3 of farm income is coming from the federal government. That obviously, once the elections are over, that's going to come out. We're going to see less of that. And finally, I believe we've got time for questions and my newsletter. If you wish to sign up for it, I'll say it's free and well worth the price. And I'm going to take a risk here. And this is a risky strategy. I'm going to show you current conditions on Wall Street right now. And let me do this. I knew that was a risk. Let me turn to somewhere. Here you go. Okay, hopefully that you're seeing that right now, and you see what's going on Wall Street. And let me just go over a few of those factors. And John,
Ernie, I don't think we're seeing that.
You're not seeing this? Okay, you're not seeing that one? Let me try it again. Let me see. Let me see there. Is that showing up?
Yep, that's showing up.
Okay. I know if that stop me, John, if I'm going too long here, if you would. But you see that that says, let me refresh that. That's not, let me refresh that. Okay. Okay, let me go through. Okay, here's the Dow. If you see both of them, Dow's down 75 basis points, almost 1%. The S&P down. Some of that, of course, is just rising risk right now. But the Russell all down, and of course that has something, I would argue, something to do with the president reporting he has coronavirus. Now let's go to crude oil prices. Look at this. This is not supportive of ethanol, but it is supportive of many of you out there in terms of your fuel costs coming down. I don't see that coming up, so ethanol is going to remain challenging. Gold prices. As I said, we almost hit $2,000 an ounce. It's now hovering around $1,900 an ounce. Silver really came off this week, and it's coming down. Now that's a bit of a concern there. What's that telling us? It could be telling us some issues in manufacturing because silver's is more reflective of what's going on in the economy. There you see the the euro versus US dollar. Let me show you some others. Here's the 10-year bond yield that I was telling you about right there. That's down less than a basis point. And here we go with Bitcoin. There you go. Put your money in Bitcoin. Are you kidding me? If you're a gambler, go ahead. I've made no money, but I've lost some money on Bitcoins. If you're a gambler, go ahead. I'm not that much of a gambler, so I'm not there. And here you see others, the cryptocurrencies, the FTSE, the Nikkei, the Japanese market. So that said, I think, John, we have some time for questions. If anybody sent questions in, and I'll be more than happy to stay with you for as long as you got time for me.
Okay, Ernie, thank you. We've got about 7 minutes, so maybe we can get to maybe 2 of these questions. The first one is, how do you think the displacement of workers from COVID-19 will impact the outlook for manufacturing employment going forward?
It's been challenging. Now I'm simply reporting what manufacturers are telling me. Now we do a monthly survey of manufacturers in 9 states, Mid-American region, which includes Iowa. We do 2 surveys, in fact, of Iowa, one of banker and rural areas, telling us that workers are increasingly becoming important and short of workers. Finding and hiring workers is particularly true for manufacturers, and back to the particularly true for we need to see of course Kirkwood Community College doing a great job there, getting with businesses, getting with manufacturers, getting with companies, and helping train those workers. We need to see workers increasing their level of training and getting out there. But one other issue is moving from where there aren't jobs to moving where there are jobs, where there are not jobs in Mount Ayr, Iowa, and moving to where there are jobs, Cedar Rapids, of course, and that's where we need to see more movement there. Of course, now it's been a world ago, it seems. Remember the old back in July of 2020, when we were giving workers, they were making more for being unemployed than being employed. We don't need to see that again. And unfortunately, the Democrat plan, they want to increase unemployment compensation back to where you're making more by being unemployed. And you don't need an economist to tell you that that is not smart economics. Now, right now, unemployment compensation is in a sane territory where workers are making less for being unemployed than they would be for working. Most people out there that are unemployed would like to go to work. So that is a challenge, and it's challenged particularly, I would argue, in Cedar Rapids as compared to other parts of the state of Iowa.
Hey, Ernie, can you unshare your screen so we can pop you up again?
Okay. Okay, sorry about that.
There you go. Okay, let's go with the other question is, are you modeling the COVID-19 pandemic with other previous pandemics?
Well,
Like
that's a great.
1918, 1919 Spanish flu?
That's a great question. You'd think we would be, but we didn't really get into the data business until around 1930, believe it or not. And there's not much data out there, but the pandemic of 1918, 1718, mostly 18, and that one was much more of a killer than this one, and the economic numbers appear to be much worse than they are now. We've got much better responses. Now, as I said, the federal government has been much more responsive than they were at that point in time. And the Federal Reserve, of course, much more responsive. So the response in this case has been much, much more quickly. Now, one thing I didn't talk about in my presentation is this pandemic. The global economic slowdown is affecting Iowa significantly by China's demand for our products, and our farm products, particularly food, has been cut. Japan, although they have increased, now they have bought more soybean and hogs, but they've cooled a bit recently. And that's one place, of course, and we had Governor Branstad, of course, former Governor Branstad, was in China as the ambassador. Now he's come back to Iowa. Welcome back, Governor Branstad. And that's been important. Iowa's done a darn good job of exporting. We need to see more. We need to convince the government, that's the federal government, that trade is good. And I hate to see these restrictions on trade. Now, I know there are political considerations. I'm not a political person. I'm an economist. I want to see more trade. And that's what we need to see. And that's really good for manufacturing, manufacturing and agriculture, two industries. Now, you in the audience may not be directly impacted by trade, but I assure you, you are indirectly affected by trade. And it's I won't say gigantic, but it's certainly important. But again, back to the pandemic of 1918, the response has been better. The downturn has been less severe, and the return to growth has been much better this time.
Okay, last question, and we only got 2 minutes, Ernie. So and you talked just about this, but do you have long-term concerns about China's economy since it isn't a fully fundamentally transparent economy and has an authoritarian government? Do you have long-term concerns?
I do have long-term concerns. I also have long-term concerns about our own, that we're moving in somewhat toward that model. I mean, some of the nonsense I'm hearing economically speaking bothers me. Yes, the lack of transparency there, the lack of, do we really know when we compare our COVID-19 level deaths to theirs, are we really comparing apples to apples or deaths to deaths? And I would argue no. I think the lack of transparency we're seeing there is a real concern. And that's not just China. There are many other nations that I don't believe the numbers. Of course, Russia is one of those nations. And we compete heavily with Russia in terms of soybean, other agricultural products. Can we believe the numbers? And we, of course, compete with Brazil. And I do believe the numbers out of Brazil, but we're going to outcompete them. Here's the overall note. We will outcompete anybody. Our manufacturers, our agriculture will outcompete them all. So thanks, John. sorry to go along.
Thank you, Ernie, for sharing your insight with us.